Hey friends, welcome to the final episode of IOIO Review, and today we are fully talking about the pirate. Now, this pirate got second place in the design task, which definitely helped me win the silver medal for IOIO 2021. But yeah, thank you so much for watching through the other parts of IOIO Review, and I'm really excited to wrap it up with this design. First, let's just take a quick glance at the pirate and point out some details, and then I'm going to talk about the process on how I designed and created this and kind of how I chose it. So the theme was sea tales and basically anything from the sea. And I thought a pirate is pretty related to the sea, but it's not a sea creature, so it would definitely be a unique take, and it would be unlikely for other participants to choose the same subject. With that, I thought there would be quite a bit of an advantage if I could choose a unique subject that would, not have to compete with anyone else in the same area. And I think I was very successful in choosing this because it is definitely a crazy endeavor to design and fold something like this with the limited amount of time we had. So we have basically his clothing, and there's quite a few inspirations I took. Obviously, one of them was from the Pirates film series with some of their characters there. And then I also tried to look up historical pieces of clothing that they would commonly wear that are a little bit more realistic. And then I kind of merged the two to create the textures and the clothing and the overall stature of this design. So even with his coats right here, right, we have just layered coats, kind of a tunic underneath with some buttons and a collar, and then going down to the waist you have kind of like a rag going down with trousers and then large boots. And then obviously right here he's missing a leg, so it is a peg leg, and then he's got a pistol which is styled to be like a flintlock, as well as another flintlock in the back. And while this model isn't fully like a 3D, like obviously from the back it doesn't look that great, I did want to try. So we have the back of a waistcoat going all the way around. If you turn it to this side, you can see how it continues. And we got fingers on both this arm as well as the arm holding the flintlock, like that. Besides that, as we move upwards, we have not as much so a face, which I'll talk about later, but we have hair and a beard. And then finally, finishing it off at the top with the tri-billed hat, I think is what it's called. And yeah, so that's kind of a highlight of some of the details, which I will start to pick through them. But first, let's kind of discuss how I actually thought of all these things, decided what I wanted to add, and how I approached this design. So we are actually going to talk about my regulator design a little bit. And here you can see that I was very inspired by, again, this was a design where it has a hat and it has pistols. And so I had designed this before the IOIO competition started, but you can tell that I used some of the structures that were inspired by both the hand and gun connection with the arm into our pirate, who has featured a gun with fingers and a cloak, or a coat, right there. So there is definitely a design graft. However, the guns looked vastly different. So this one is modeled more after a revolver, and this one is styled more after a flintlock, but that is all shaping. The general structure is pretty much the same. Now we have a asymmetrical model here because our arm with the pistol is not matched on the other side. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but essentially what I did for this was using partials to achieve the hand and gun. So I had to do partials on this side, but I didn't really have to do on this side, and it saved me some room on the paper. Now, the next inspiration is the hat. And the hat, this one is more of like a cowboy-styled hat. This one is obviously the tri-bill, but you can basically achieve the tri-bill by folding up the corners into the triangle shape that this one is. And feel free to correct me if I am classifying this hat incorrectly. But yeah, so these two structures are very, very similar. Now, something that is not similar is the hat connection with hair. So we have hair, a beard. Obviously, on our cowboy, he doesn't have hair or a beard. So what I had to do was take the design structure from here, which comes from an edge flap, and add additional flaps, which I believe these were actually middle flaps for all of these, for the face and the hair, and then get the same connection with the arms. Now, that is where our first problem occurred. So the connection from the hair to the arms was incorrect, and let me show you. So here is actually the very first pirate I folded, and you can tell it is with quite a different paper, and I chose the speckled paper because I thought the textures would look cool blended in with the pirate, kind of like a sea, aged kind of feel. However, I think it actually hides some more details than it's supposed to. But the other problem is the actual structure for this design is incorrect. So from the back, you can really much tell that this arm is way longer than this arm. And so kind of how I explained, this end has a pistol and it uses partials to achieve this, but the overall flap was way larger than on this side. Now, I was constraining myself to its grid size, which I believe is a 64 grid, or it's 32 with partial 64ths, and then partial 1/28ths for the hand and gun connection, or something like that. And then the arm on this side is just the opposite corner, but you can tell that I didn't have enough room on this opposite corner because of something I did with the head. And the reason why I ran out of room is because as these branched out, they took up too much horizontal space and left not enough room for our arm. So you can see we pretty much finished, we even got through most of the shaping on this model and then discovered that it was wrong. And one of the key elements is because this hinge, not only is it short, but it's also located way too high up along the shoulders, where I would have to let it fall down a little bit and then push it to the side to actually get it to swing outwards. You can see it's like directly attached with the line of with our head. Our hat's not a helmet, but we want it by the shoulder. And so we had a huge mistake there. Now the rest of it is pretty decent, but I decided that, hey, we are competing. I can't let this, slide. There's no way I would be able to hide the fact or shape that the arm is so short. And I also wanted to pose it a little bit, but obviously I can't if it's just falling behind. Now, the issue with the hinge being near the head, near the hat, is actually shared by the regulator design. However, the regulator has much larger lengths, grid size, and layers distributed for the arm. So while the hinge is still up here by the hat, I had enough length to have the actual joint be along the shoulder. And you can tell that in the back here, we also have a lot more going on with the regulator. So that allows us to do so like this, even though this is also suboptimal placement for the hinge of the arm. That did not fly well on the pirate. And I'm going to make a quick fix to what I just said. The regulator is actually the 64 grid, and the pirate is based off a 48 grid. And so the solution to this, one, to make the arms longer, would be to increase the grid size but keep most of the structure the same. The consequence there would be just some wasted paper, as everything would be considered as an edge graft, bumping up the grid like that to fit the same kind of design. But I didn't want to do that. I wanted to constrain myself to the 48 grid because I think the consequences of having the extra grid unused was too great, and I didn't want to do that. The other way to do it would be to mostly redesign this model to have the packing be a lot more organized, but I was on such a time crunch. At this point, I believe there were maybe 5 days left before submission for me to complete this model. So what would we do? And our solution was kind of a mix of redesigning the structure while maintaining as much of the original structure and constraining the grid size to the 48 grid as possible. And let me show you what we did here. We couldn't actually fix the issue with the hinge starting from the hat, but I was able to displace some of the length from this arm into this arm, as well as changing a little bit of our neck structure that would allow the horizontal room on the grid to accommodate both arms. So now you can actually see here that this arm looks quite different from our hand and wrist transition here, as the sleeve goes all the way down to the hand, whereas our sleeve has some extra room over there. But the result is the arms are much longer and much more even. And again, to fix the actual issue we have with the hinges up attached to the hat instead of the shoulders was not possible. And it would take a lot more to redesign that section. So this was kind of the easy solution I came up with within a day, and immediately treated this paper and started folding it for our final fold. So while I had spent about a week designing the pirate and folding the first one, I redesigned just that one little section, mixing around the packing with the arms, in less than a day, and then started folding it to completion within the rest of the 4 days. So this was quite a crazy endeavor. I still think it's very flawed. There is a solution I know I can do to make these hinges actually come down in line with our shoulders correctly, and that would allow for a lot better posing. As you can see here, this is about as much as we can really shape out our arms without it looking really jank. Now, the reason why I couldn't easily make that fix is because we had so many details here with the amount of level shifters we used for the chest, as well as having transition units from a 32 grid down to, from a 24 grid down to a 48, having the hinge drop lower would be actually folding through many of the layers that have the transition units there. So they already kind of block off, and you can think of it either as not quite self-intersection, but there's kind of locks that are used from the transition units that would really not allow our hinge to dip down to the proper level. Or basically right around here, it'd be super thick as we're folding through folded layers. And that's really bad. Now, this is the result of the pirate after all that dilemma, and I think it turned out pretty good. I am very happy with the second place in the design category, and I think it turned out to be quite a cool model. People really enjoyed it when I posted it and were quite surprised. And I think part of that actually has to do with not just the technical form, which the technical form is a little complex, but the technical form is flawed. The strength of this is more how I represented the pirate using origami, and a little bit of uncanny valley type stuff to make a successful humanoid piece. Alright, so kind of what I was mentioning before, uncanny valley, and making it look, or not really look exactly like a pirate, but able to represent a pirate that it was immediately recognizable, no questions asked. And I can confirm that from some of the judges and some of my friends immediately looking at that and thinking, oh, hey, isn't that this person character from, Pirates films? And I was like, oh yeah, they got it immediately, that this is kind of a pirate or a buccaneer, or it's very similar to pirate fictional characters. What really does that? And what I want you to do is actually look at this while you're watching and try to think of, why do you think it looks like a pirate? What part? Is it the gun? Is it the clothing? Is it everything combined? Is it the boots? Is it the peg leg? And drop a comment what you really think of when you just look at this and think, why do I think this looks like a pirate? Now, one thing that I really think helps is with the face. If I went with a plain face, like I normally do, with, say, the regulator, I don't think it would have as much of an effect, even though the hat is pretty signature. You know, technically, this kind of garb, besides the peg leg, could match to any kind of maybe 1700s, 1600s kind of era where there's flintlock pistols. You wouldn't really immediately think pirate. Now, this is what I want to talk about, the face. Instead of doing a plain face, we've got a beard as well as hair. And I was inspired by this beard from actually a collaboration between Yuho and Bodo, where they made a dwarf. And I really liked how Yuho represented the beard in his fold, using just simple sculpting and shaping to kind of get these, shadows to really work for us. And, there's been kind of talks that with paper, not only do you have color, but you have light to determine different shades. Now we have just one color here, and therefore we can't do a color change for the hair. But the color, or not really the color, but the texture we have available is the shadows to mock or represent color, and that gives a stark difference between the hair versus like the smoothness of the clothes. So instead of having a color change, we use light to really do that for us. And it's to the point where this isn't anything close to like strands of hair, right? It's just representing a beard. And with the beard, we have representation of where kind of our nose would be, or where the brim of that, long bushy mustache going into the beard reaches, as well as just references of cheekbones along the structure, and then making it easier for ourselves by hiding any eyes with the shadow of our hat. So in actuality, this doesn't have a face at all. It's only mustache, a little bit of cheekbone, and then shadow. And by doing so, I eliminated the complexity of having to shape a realistic face, and I avoided the uncanny valley by only using representations of features instead of going for a hyper-realistic representational form. And I think that was the greatest strength in just the overall head with the hair and the beard and the hat combination to complement the body. I know that was kind of a lot, but that was a huge strategy that I was, had thought of from the start of when I said I'm going to do a pirate for the design task. And I think that really paid off, especially since I had to fold it within 4 days, While I did give myself more time originally, that's what it came down to, and it paid off. Now let's quickly talk about some more things that I think were successful, and then we'll go into some things that were not as successful. Kind of what I mentioned before, another selling point, which you might have picked, was, oh, I see a peg leg pirate, And while this may or may not have been historically, accurate, well, I guess historically people did have peg legs. Seafair was pretty dangerous. However, we probably wouldn't have a situation where this peg leg is matched with the rest of the clothing and a person is actively ready for combat. That might not have been likely. But in fantasy, that is definitely or in media, I should say, that is one aspect that really directly connects with pirate. And thankfully, that is recognized internationally somehow, maybe, again, through those pirate movies. That also paid off to tell that this is not just some person from like the 1600s, 1700s. This is a pirate, and I really wanted it to be a pirate so that there'd be no question that the theme was not applied in my design. I could create a really cool humanoid character, but if it didn't match the theme of Sea Tales, I knew I would get docked off points. But in this case, it was recognized as a pirate, and that directly fit the theme. And theme is a really important part to consider when you're competing in IOIO for the design task. You can't just think to create something technically, complex, but not match the theme at all. It has to do kind of both. It's it doesn't even have to be complex, but it definitely has to match the theme, is the point I want to come across. Now, other things that I think went well, we have extra layers here. And instead of it normally subtracting from the cleanliness, because I merged it in with this little sash, This actually was kind of an afterthought. It's this leftover flap that's, switched over from the side. As you can see, it's asymmetric. It's only on this side. Even on the coat, it's quite different. That really benefits because of kind of the same thing. We used light and contrast in textures to really define that. Another thing I think is quite successful is in the hand, although this isn't 100% successful, but hands are really expressive, right? So that is one point where I wish I could shape it even more like this, which there's much better examples of folders who are able to be expressive with hands. But the fact I just shaped the hand instead of it being like that or closed or, very stiff, it just adds dynamic. And the expressiveness in the hand can bring life to even a static stance like this. So if you also saw the photos I used that I submitted, you can definitely tell that that hand was another prevalent feature, not as much for the judges to be like, oh my goodness, hand, points, but it just aids the eye in looking at the pirate as a whole. And for things to improve. So when I look at this design, I see a very imperfect design, imperfect shaping, and it's kind of incomplete. Now, I'm not trying to roast myself too hard, but again, I said I had 5 days to fold it, basically. And I can tell that this is 5 days of work. I had to go so fast, And normally I could spend weeks shaping a model. So if we turn it to the side here, you can see that our arm that has no structure at all. It's way too flat. And again, I basically just used glue for shaping, since we were allowed to do so, and stuck all those layers together in order to make a clean plane in the front. So in the front, it looks very clean, right? Now, when it was unglued, basically I had all these layers like opened. And so if you took a photo like this and you saw all these extra layers, it really takes away from how it looks as a finished model. While everything else is like flattened layers, very clean looking, if you have all these extra layers, it really loses the effect and it takes away from these layers right here. So what I would like to do is I can still glue most of the layers, but you can go underneath and really round out the arm. In this case, I did not do that. I didn't have the time to do that. And from the side profiles of the design, it looks really bad, to be frank. But again, something that could be improved. I already kind of talked about the cons and the overall design with the shoulders. So again, that would be another area. If I drop the shoulder hinge, it can actually probably make the arms be shaped to look longer. They wouldn't actually be longer, but you would be able to move them around as if they were longer. And that would really help out too. And I guess the last con that I'll mention is something that I've recently been really competing against myself to avoid. And that is torso length. So in terms of proportions, our torso is still a little too long. Now, because of shaping, it really helped out to give the illusion that it's not too long. But ideally, like, the torso can be 1 unit shorter, and then overall the legs would look a lot longer, a lot more proportion. I think maybe on camera it looks okay, but if you look at it from different angles, there are a few where the legs look kind of chonky, and he's like really weirdly shortened. It just doesn't look quite right, which kind of dips into the uncanny valley in terms of proportions, because if you really take a close look, the arm is almost the size of the leg, and that's not quite right. And then the torso is just like really long, and I think this is in general with humanoids, especially when you're stacking designs and patterns into the torso area, it's really easy to make them too large. I'm not sure if you can really tell in here too, but I don't know, it just doesn't seem right. But yeah, that is the other kind of mistake here. Again, also the torso being too long, we have this weird patch of no textures. I think if it was a little shorter, it would blend in with everything else a lot better. But that's, it's a little nitpicky. It's something to avoid. And I've been thinking about that a lot more in my future designs. But yeah, that's the pirate, guys. thank you so much, everyone, for watching and listening to me rant about this design. If you would like to fold this, the crease pattern is on my website, which I'll probably link in the description, but I do warn you, the cons, design-wise, that I mentioned are featured in that crease pattern. I don't know if I have time to actually fix it, but if you would like to go ahead and try, and you can even try to fix the design yourself if you'd like to fold it, it is pretty neat. I might want to revisit it if I have time because I think the subject matter is really cool. And there's a lot of potential here with the kind of structure for the hat and the beard and all the other details featured throughout. But yeah, this was IOIO review. One more time, I'd like to give a huge shout out to Andrey Ermakov and the IOIO 2021 team for just an amazing competition. The best origami folding competition in my opinion currently in terms of format, judging, tasks, variety, all that kind of stuff. It really truly is amazing, and it's amazing that they were able to accomplish all that, get all the logistics right, have so many participants, and allow it to be free. Really cool. I hope you all enjoyed my folds from the competition, and I hope to see maybe from watching my videos you're inspired to try to compete in the next one, and you have some strategies to take yours to the next level. So yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments. If you'd like to support me, don't forget to subscribe if you're not subscribed, and you can just share any of my videos and just watch them. That helps me out a ton. But yeah, thank you guys so much. I'll see you in the next video.
All this origami, all this origami, all this origami got me going kamikaze now.